popping out from a screen near you. Would you really want to see it? Join Peter tomorrow, just after midday.
Today's You and Yours was presented by Winfred Robertson. The producer was Vanessa Carr. Well, we'll be joining Martha Carney in round one in a couple of minutes. Before then, the weather forecast from John Hammond.
Thanks so much, Corrie. Well, as you're no doubt aware, snow has been causing havoc yet again today. It's still snowing across large parts of the country, certainly for the south and east of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, Wales, the Midlands. Further sleet and snow to come, some fairly heavy snow just now across some southern parts of Wales in particular. As we go through the rest of the afternoon, I think the sleet and snow will tend to dwindle. There's still some wintry lows around and precious little in the way of thawing going on. Temperatures widely across the UK held between 1 and 3 degrees. The exception is across the far southeast of England and parts of London as well, where it's much milder. You haven't had any snow, but you've had rain, and temperatures will continue to be somewhat higher here, around 5 to 7 degrees, with some rain from time to time. Now, as we go into the night, many places will become dry for a time. Very icy, of course, after the earlier snow freezes yet again, with temperatures widely at or below freezing, sharp frost. And then our attention is drawn to the south as another weather system pushes up through the English Channel. Rain initially on the south coast, but once more as that encounters the cold air resident across southern England, we'd like to see further significant snowfall. The Met Office has issued an early warning to that effect. It's disruptive snow, quite possible, in a zone through the West Country, much of southern England, up towards the Cotswolds, the Downs, the Chilterns particularly badly affected. We could see, well, 15 to 20 centimetres of snow locally, so hence the possibility of disruption. And that does include parts of the London area as well. As we go through the day, that snow is going to linger, I think, for much of the day before eventually it starts to ease away to the southeast with some last clear Kent late on tomorrow. For the rest of the UK, though, it's a brighter picture. Very cold still, temperatures not far above freezing, so only a slow thaw, but there will be some sunshine to compensate. Some wintry showers around the north and western coasts and hills. Now, looking further ahead into the weekend, it stays cold across all areas. There will be some sunshine. In fact, many places will have plenty of dry and bright weather. We've got to be alert, though, to the possibility of further snowfall at times. Corrie, back to you.
Thanks very much, John. Well, air conditioning is probably the last thing on anyone's mind at the moment, given the weather, but it is of concern to Tom Heap in this week's Costing the Air. Finding out more in half an hour.
10 minutes to go! Fill your basket! Last chance to try some from Woolly!
When Woolworths closed its doors for the final time, staff were left to face an uncertain future.
This is when the reality starts to kick in.
What can you do? You've got to deal with it.
BBC Radio 4 follows the fortunes of one former employee and his family.
I've basically got to find a job to pay next month's mortgage payment.
It's my story after Woolworths on Monday night at 8. The World at 1, this is Martha Carney with 30 minutes of news and comment. The headlines today. The Bank of England has announced a half-point cut in interest rates to a new historic low of 1%. Is that unfair for savers or necessary to boost the economy? We'll hear the debate amongst economists. The Foreign Secretary has been defending his decision not to release evidence of torture claims in the case of Binyamin Mohammed. A former Labour minister tells us that Britain shouldn't give way to the United States. As fresh snow brings more travel disruption, the AA warns about roads becoming death traps. And 14 years after a landmark agreement on the decommissioning of weapons in Northern Ireland, little's been handed in. The Northern Ireland Secretary tells us he's only prepared to give loyalist groups another 6 months to surrender their weapons. The BBC News is read by Charlotte Green.
The Bank of England has announced another cut in interest rates. It's reducing the base rate by 0.5% to a new low of 1%. The Monetary Policy Committee has warned that the outlook for the economy remains weak. Here's our business correspondent, Nils Blythe.
These are extraordinary times for the economy, but the Bank of England's mandate is simply to control inflation. That's expected to fall well below the target rate, perhaps turning into outright deflation. So the bank has cut its key lending rate again to a new record low of 1%. City analysts think it may fall even further in the coming months. The Building Societies Association has protested that these very low rates are punishing savers. Separately, the Halifax House Price Index rose by 1.9% in January after 11 consecutive months of decline. The Halifax says it detects some very early signs that the housing market is stabilising, but warns that too much weight should not be put on 1 month's figures. The rival Nationwide Index showed prices continuing to fall in January.
The European Central Bank has left interest rates unchanged this month. They've been held at 2%. Ford is cutting up to 850 jobs across the UK. 500 are going at its plant in Southampton, which makes transit vans. Latest figures from the motor industry show that new car sales fell almost 31% in January, compared with the same time last year. Heavy snow has brought disruption again to many parts of the UK. Central and Western England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are worst hit. Some local councils are running low on salt and are gritting only the main roads. But the government has defended the response to what is described as exceptional conditions. Terry Stiasny reports.
The snow, which has affected much of the country, has meant that over 1,000 schools have been closed, with the largest numbers in England in Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire, Northamptonshire and Derbyshire. More than 600 Welsh schools have also shut. Questions have been raised about how well prepared the country has been for the snow. The motoring organisation, the AA, said that the situation on many local roads amounted to a road safety crisis. Some local authorities have said that they're running low on stocks of grit and salt. The AA called on the government to import emergency supplies if necessary. The Transport Secretary, Jeff Poon, said that the challenge was trying to judge how often snow clearing equipment would be used and balancing that against the cost.
And you can go to our news website for all the latest updates on snow in your area. That's at bbc.co.uk/news. The Foreign Secretary, David Miliband, has defended the decision not to disclose intelligence relating to the alleged torture of Binyam Mohammed, who's being held in Guantanamo Bay. Yesterday, 2 High Court judges said they were unable to publish information on the treatment of the former British resident, and suggested that America would reduce security links if the details were made public. In a statement to the Commons, Mr Miliband told MPs the US had not threatened to break off cooperation if the documents were published. The BBC has defended its decision to remove Carol Thatcher from her role as a reporter on The One Show for referring off-air to a tennis player as a gollywog. Miss Thatcher's agent said the comment was made in a private conversation and meant as a joke. But the controller of BBC One, Jay Hunt, said serious offence had been caused. Here's our media correspondent, Torrin Douglas.
This morning's papers carry many comments criticising the BBC for its decision to drop Carol Thatcher from The One Show while continuing to employ Jonathan Ross, whose lewd comments were actually broadcast. Jay Hunt rejected the comparison, saying the presenter recognised he'd overstepped the mark and had apologised publicly, while Miss Thatcher refused to do so. The BBC One controller said it was deemed inappropriate for her to continue to work on a show that prided itself on the diversity of its production team and the range of its coverage across the country. Ms Thatcher will still work for the BBC on other programmes. Ms Hunt also denied that the remarks had been private. She said Ms Thatcher had been speaking in the programme's green room with outsiders present as a roving reporter for The One Show, and that was rather different.
How the world has changed. Just a few short months ago, the idea of interest rates down to 1% was unthinkable. In fact, many in the city were worried about the risk of rising inflation. This lunchtime, the Bank of England decided to cut interest rates by half a percentage point to a new record low in an attempt to stave off the worst effects of recession. Meanwhile, the European Central Bank has kept its main interest rate on hold at 2%. So what effect will the move by the Bank of England have? Let's begin by gauging reaction in the City of London. Richard Hunter is head of UK equities at the stockbrokers Hargreaves Lansdown. This move was pretty widely predicted, wasn't it?
It was indeed, and that was much the case with the decision of the European Central Bank as well. It was only 3 weeks ago or so that the ECB met, and Trichet said at that time that it was unlikely anything would happen in February, and the next rendezvous would be in March. So